Get the latest weather, traffic, and news updates online at 560theanswer.com. Now, from the Signature Bank Studios, this is Chicago's Morning Answer with Dan Proft on AM 560. The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft here. So, of course, today is the 5th anniversary of J6, something that's still referenced on again, off again, when leftists try to throw the kitchen sink at Trump and MAGA world, generally speaking. One of the individuals caught up in the prosecutions after the riot that occurred on January 6th was Tom Caldwell, a U.S. Navy veteran from Virginia. He was folded in with the Oath Keepers and Oath Keepers founder Stuart Rhodes. He was one of the few that was charged with seditious conspiracy. You know, so many of the charges against J6ers were process crimes and innovative uses of federal statute to whack people with obstruction charges. Ultimately, Caldwell was convicted, he was charged with seditious conspiracy felonies. He was ultimately only convicted of tampering with evidence, which is essentially turns out to be basically a process crime. And he was granted pardon by President Trump, although it was sort of after the fact, in terms of he had already served his time for the charge that upon which he was convicted that ultimately stood. But he's written a book about the experience, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Tom Caldwell, Navy veteran, and J6-er joins us now. Tom, thanks for being with us. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me on the air, Dan.
So I know you were there from reading about your story. You were there with your wife. You never went into the Capitol, and yet you were folded into the Oath Keepers and the alleged seditious conspirators. How did that all transpire?
Well, as you pointed out, never went into the Capitol, never committed violence, never hurt anybody, never broke anything. And so your question is spot on. And as I sat in solitary confinement for months at a time, I thought about that myself. We found out through discovery, that's the process of getting the so-called evidence they're going to whack you with, that since I had met a couple of members of the Oath Keepers organization, and one of them actually had my phone number in her phone, that was the problem. And as many veterans know, you refer to each other by the rank that you had on active duty. I was a Navy lieutenant commander when I retired. And so this veteran of the Army Rangers had put my phone number in her phone as Commander Tom. So when they attacked her home, took her in custody, and got the phone, within 2 hours, an FBI special agent had a signature of a federal judge on an arrest warrant for me as the commander of the Oath Keepers and the commander of the attack on the Capitol. You can't make this stuff up.
And you had no association with the Oath Keepers?
No, never been a member, never been an officer. I did meet a couple of them, and I got to tell you, they are not what they're portrayed as. They are an organization made up of veterans and current and former law enforcement. They're a community service organization that responds to things like natural disasters. They're there to help their neighbors before FEMA arrives.
Well, even if they weren't, you're allowed to meet, let's say they were criminals. You're allowed to meet criminals so long as you don't engage in criminal activity with them. I mean, meeting somebody as a member of an organization is not a crime as far as I understand.
Now, stop making sense, Dan.
Yeah, well,
that has nothing to do with the way the DOJ operates. They live on the idea of shredding constitutional, civil, and human rights.
And so, I mean, just take us through that process, though. I mean, I assume that you and through your attorney are making the same sort of points that I'm making and others. And so the response from federal prosecutors is what?
Well, basically, they just kept heaping more new fantasy charges on me. As we presented evidence that they were lying about the other stuff, they just make more things. It got to the point where my lawyer just said, Tom, look, they know you're innocent, but they don't care. They want to put you in jail for the rest of your life because it fits their narrative.
So ultimately, I mean, take us through. So you're charged with seditious conspiracy. As I mentioned, ultimately, only one conviction stood up until you were pardoned, and that was for tampering with evidence, which I understand was deleting a text. But just take us through the entire process of the initial charges, then the charges that were dismissed, then the conviction and the pardon, and what that text was all about.
Oh, sure, absolutely. Well, initially, there was no conspiracy involved at all. They said it was trespassing into the Capitol, attempting to hunt down lawmakers, doing violence inside the Capitol, damaging property. All of those things were finally just floating away in the ether. It was a year later that they made up seditious conspiracy, conspiracy to obstruct, conspiracy to prevent an officer from discharging their duties, obstruction of an official proceeding, and I'm just reading them off the charge list, and tampering with documents, as you talked about. In the meantime, they bankrupted us. They put me in prison in solitary confinement. They tortured me to try to get me to say things that were not true.
Wait. They tortured you? What do you mean?
Absolutely. Well, I was in a really rotten jail, not in the gulag in D.C. that people hear about. It was a little country jail in Southern Virginia, and I was put in solitary confinement, and I was subjected to flashing light torture. I was in an ice-cold cell, no windows. I slept on a floor with a threadbare plastic blanket around me, and when all of that mind control stuff didn't work, then they plunged me into total darkness. Let me tell you what that does to your head after a few days. And when that didn't work, they decided that they would ramp it up by giving me a little what they called special handling, where they kick you in the groin until you pass out. Gosh, I don't want to get too graphic, but Dan, I was bleeding out of places I shouldn't have been bleeding out of for months, even after my release from prison.
Oh wow. So how long were you in solitary confinement?
Well, in terms of days, I did nothing compared to some of the people that were in pretrial confinement for 2 years. I was in there for 53 days, but they made it the worst days of my life. And I'm a disabled veteran. The first thing they did was deny me all my medications. And then all of the things that I just talked about, and it was tough. They took me to the limit of my endurance before our attorney was able to get me out.
And 53 days, and so you had I don't know if you know, but you essentially had federal agents come in and torture you. I mean, in addition to the psychological torture of the lights and the darkness and so forth, actually physically torture you.
Talk about this in the book. You know, there's always a paper trail when the government does something. The U.S. Marshal Service actually checked me out of the Central Virginia Regional Jail in Orange, Virginia, and took me down a country road to do what they would do. So we know who did this stuff. I'm a kind of guy that pulls it all together. I bring the receipts in this book. I don't just make accusations. I show you what they did so that the American people will know the horror inflicted on U.S. citizens, and I'm not the only one.
And what was it they wanted from you? Tell us this. What was it that they were demanding from you and torturing you to try to obtain?
To confess to leading the attack. They wanted me to point the finger at a go signal given by President Trump, and they wanted me to implicate members of the Oath Keepers, some of whom I had never even met before.
They wanted you to implicate the president as well?
Yes, and to say the president called us to the nation's capital to make this attack. In fact, during my initial interrogation by the FBI agents, and I've got the transcript, and I share it in the book, they say, well, gosh, I bet you're sorry that you had all that MAGA stuff. I bet you're sorry you got involved with President Trump and voted for him, aren't you?
And so what was the text that that you deleted that they used as a tampering charge? As the basis for a tampering charge?
Yeah, my wife and I had the most exhaustive pictorial history of our time in D.C. that day, hundreds and hundreds of photos. So what I did was I was sending them to my friends because there's no violence in them. And so they said, well, we can't really find any pictures of you doing anything bad, so you must have deleted them. So there's no evidence, but that's because you deleted the evidence, and that is the charge that stood.
The charge is you tampered with evidence by deleting pictures that we don't know what they were.
Right, you got it. And they convinced the D.C. jury who wanted to convict everybody of something. They were going to find everybody guilty of something, but your listeners need to know that I was actually found innocent of all of these other things. The seditious, the conspiracy to obstruct, all of that stuff. And there was a thing called 1512C2, big yawn, right? Obstruction of an official proceeding.
Yeah, right. The Sarbanes-Oxley thing, right?
That's right. And that thing was about the Enron scandal. It was about shredding financial documents. So Congress, and so the DOJ misapplied it to me and hundreds of other J6ers in order to imprison them because there is no law in this country against peaceful assembly and redress of grievances.
Just on the texting thing, so what did they allege that you had deleted? What I mean, they have to have some theory about what you deleted and some basis to argue that we know you deleted it. What was represented in court?
Well, what I was doing was I was sending out selfies and all these wonderful pictures of my day in D.C. And they claim that in one of these text messages, I had actually also sent some bad pictures. And because they can't find them,
well, what do they allege was the bad picture? How do they know? Did somebody else receive a bad picture that they tracked down?
Not at all. And see, what they were trying to do was they were trying to find proof of their fantasy that I had actually gone into the Capitol and done all of this stuff. And I will point out this one more thing that you'll find really great, Dan. And my phone, which took all of those pictures that day, over 200, and all those videos, is still in the possession of the FBI. They seized it the day they came to my house, and they put all their electronics on it. And they couldn't find any other pictures than the ones that are there. That phone is still in an evidence locker in Manassas, Virginia, in the possession of the FBI.
And even if you deleted the photos, then one of the recipients in your address book would ostensibly have these photos, and they could track it on the other end, right?
I do, because they invaded everybody's phone that they could possibly get at their hands on. Electronics, they do that. So they're just suggesting you took photos that indicated you were like casing the joint, you were casing the Capitol or something like that. Is that what they were insinuating? And then you deleted them, even though we can't find them on your end or the end of any of these other alleged co-conspirators of yours. That's basically it. It went into the ether, and I magically made it so that their technology could never find it.
I mean, that's astounding. And so,
it truly is.
Well, I guess you're not appealing that conviction because you were pardoned.
Well, sure. And what happened is in January of 2025, 25 months after that one guilty, charge was held up in federal court, I went before a judge to get sentenced. Now, bear in mind, I'd already done the 53 days, and Judge Amit P. Mehta of the D.C. Circuit looked at me and said, Mr. Caldwell, in the final analysis, the government has failed to meet its burden of proof of your guilt. Go home. Good luck. My ruling is time served. Bump. All rise.
Well, it was time served, but you still had the conviction prior to the pardon, correct?
That is exactly correct. And I was not pardoned on the day that the president was inaugurated, when so many were. My pardon came about 2 months after that and was signed personally by the president. So I was a little bit disappointed on the 20th of January, but the important thing was his efforts got people out of prison, and that's what we wanted.
And, I mean, based on what you say about being tortured and the receipts you say you have as memorialized in the book, are you filing suit against the federal government?
Well, we're trying to approach the Department of Justice about these things that have been done. We haven't sued them so far. People are talking about class action suits. That's not really possible. You can't hold individuals responsible because the lawyers and the judges operate under this thing called absolute immunity. But
but law enforcement. I mean, but I mean, not being kicked in the groin repeatedly or subjected to torture that's in violation of federal law. That's actionable.
That's absolutely true. We have found a good attorney who has approached the DOJ with documentation, the federal government's own documentation of a lot of these things, and said, these things are wrong. Would you like to talk about this? And that's where we are right now. I don't know that we'll actually get restitution in the way that the world understands it in terms of monetary stuff, when you can't go back in the Wayback Machine with Mr. Peabody and undo the hours and days and years that we've lost, my wife and I, under the boot heels. But we can try. And
you can try. I mean, look, it's just the same thing at the state level. If you were unjustly imprisoned and you were treated in violation of federal law while you were unjustly imprisoned, I mean, then it's a monetary settlement, just as we see happen all the time at state level when you have improper convictions.
True, but in the United States nowadays, justice is just us. It's very hard to get your time in front of somebody that will make a decision for you. In the state of Virginia, for example, they are already telling us, well, the statute of limitations is passed to file something. And I don't know what's going to happen with the new government coming into play in Virginia. The Spanberger lady and her leftists that are coming in, we're probably not going to get a lot of support if we bring a suit or try to, or even talk about this thing in the state of Virginia. So it's kind of up in the air, to tell you the truth, Dan.
It's interesting. I mean, because you potentially state-level exposure, too, because you said you were in a state facility in rural Virginia, right? That's you got pulled out of. This is really interesting. Wow. Tom Caldwell, Navy veteran, a J6-er, arrested, tried, thrown in jail, as he just provided in excruciating detail. It's all in the book, The Mouths of the Wicked, a true January 6th story of corruption, persecution, survival, and victory. Tom Caldwell and the book, The Mouths of the Wicked. Tom Caldwell, thanks so much for joining us, and good luck with the book and whatever form of restitution you can obtain.
Well, thanks, Dan. We hope that when people read the book, they'll find it engaging, enraging, and maybe encouraging, because my wife and I, we came out on the other side with the help of the Lord. He's the one that carried us all the way through, and we don't know what he has planned for us, but it's going to be good.
Very good. All right. Tom Caldwell, The Mouths of the Wicked. Thanks so much. He joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
Welcome back to Ask Hasselus. I'm Weston. What's your question?
What's the secret to your success?
Clean living, hard work, and no employees.
You lost me on that last one.
No employees?
Yeah.
That's the secret sizzle that makes Hasselus mattress so popular.
How are you successful?